Hi everyone, and welcome to week 4's video. This week is going to be on health and persons, where we're looking at kind of the idea of what is health and holism and what is personhood really mean. These are all components that you will need to adapt into your philosophy of nursing paper. So again, know that week by week we are doing pieces that are playing into that bigger whole. So keep that in mind as you are going through this week. Some things that I want to highlight from this week is, again, that we are focusing on this idea of holism as it relates to health. We want the concept to get across to be that even if you're not in what might be optimal health, that you can still be a whole being. This kind of speaks to those people that have chronic illnesses and how do they maintain their level of health. I hope that after you kind of read some of the concepts that are presented in the Wesrick book, that you're able to kind of take some time for personal reflection. What I want you to be asking yourself is, are we offering care to the heart of a person, or are we being confined to the roles of kind of the institutional nurse? How do we make that transition from kind of the model of medical healing or curing to one of really looking at the holistic being? I want you this week to think about some of these questions. How do you as a nurse differentiate between health and holism? How does our healthcare environment aid in healing? If it does, how does it help with that? How is our health environment a barrier for holism? And how do ethical principles help us define personhood? So going into this week, some of the forum posts that you're going to have is in your Moodle. There is something called the Dunn's Health Model. Again, you'll read about it in your textbook. But I'd like you to use that document. You need to think back while protecting patient privacy about a patient that you remember from the time that you've been a nurse, or if you have to, somebody that you met during nursing school. And I want you to think about them and use Dunn's Health and Wellness Grid and kind of plot where you would put this person on the grid. And then you need to write a forum post as to why you would put that person there. The second forum post is going to be you explaining the difference that you see between what happens with healing and curing in your place of work. Tell us kind of where you work. How do you see healing happen? How do you see curing happen? This is tied to the Quinn article. So again, I have that posted. Make sure that you read that one before you tackle that project. And then the last thing, the paper that you're going to have for Sunday is you formulating your definition of personhood. Again, this is an activity that you are going to basically kind of cut and paste into your final paper. Your final paper, your philosophy of nursing paper, asks you to address kind of this concept of personhood. So I want you to find a theorist that you like, how they define the meta-paradigm concept of person. I want you to use an ethical perspective as well in your definition. And I want you to use a Christian perspective or a biblical resource in creating your definition. So again, your definition of personhood needs to be informed by 3 different things: a theorist, pick an ethical principle to help define how you're defining personhood, and then again a religious kind of bend on how personhood is defined. I think in Moodle it says Christian, but again, I am open to whatever kind of religious bend you want to put on how personhood is defined. Within your Moodle page, and I'm scrolling down here so that I can get to some of these concepts, again, you'll see that the Janet Quinn article that's entitled On Healing, Wholeness, and the Halion Effect is in there. There's also snippets from the Bonnie Wesrick book. I could not, under copyright, post the entire book, so there are just snippets in there, but I think that it will get you the concept behind the book. Many reflections. Some of them are from even past students of mine, but I hope you really can, if you haven't experienced kind of the frailty of life, that some of these reflections that people have been willing to share with us help you kind of understand what that is like for people. Again, the wellness grid is on there, and there is also a Word document on there entitled Goshen College's Guide to Ethical or Moral Decision Making. As I've spoken to you before, we ended up taking out a standalone ethics course. Again, many associate degree programs give you an ethics course. If you've not had one, though, I want to be able to guide you through this process. So it's really important for you to start kind of looking things up and exploring this concept yourself, as it's not going to be a standalone thing, but rather incorporated through your nursing classes here. But use this decision-making guide as a way to help you kind of step-by-step process through how you make ethical decisions and the impact that they have on others. So again, for step 2 of that paper is to really approach personhood from some kind of ethical principle. So from beneficence, or the concept of utility, of doing things for the greatest good for the most people. Find a ethical principle that you can apply to the concept of personhood. Again, some YouTube videos that you can look at there that are posted. A shout out to the Holistic Nurses Association. I am not a member, but it is an intriguing association. If you want to look into them further, just Google Holistic Nurses Association, but make sure that you look at the handout that I have posted in week 4 about their association, how they go about defining things. I've even noticed some workshops here kind of in the local area, but very, very interesting group of nurses really looking at how do we give holistic care. So again, if you are kind of into alternative or natural therapies or anything, this is really something that may speak well to you. Let's see, that about covers it. Again, I have not only put parts of Bonnie Wesrick's book up for you, but then I made a YouTube video that you can click on, and that is going to be part of reflection for this next week too, is to watch those videos. I go through about 5 different clinical scenarios, and I want you just to spend some time in kind of quiet internal reflection of how do you see these scenarios or like scenarios playing out in your place of work? A lot of them have kind of an ED bend, but again, I think you could see them play out in any unit or any workplace where nursing is happening. And just kind of reflect a little bit on what in that scenario speaks to you. What kind of vows do you want to make of, boy, if I ever run into this situation in the future, I'm going to think about my response a little bit differently. Again, as always, we have a few PowerPoints to get through. I always save the best part for the end. We have a PowerPoint that will go over the Janet Quinn article a little bit, one on health and one on ethical principles. So again, this is kind of your Ethics 101 tutorial here today. So let me just jump right in with sharing some of these PowerPoints with you. And I think that we're going to start with the Janet Quinn article, because that kind of captures a little bit what we're trying to get at this entire week. So the book, On Healing, Wholeness, and the Halion Effect. As you're reading this, I want you to be thinking about what is the difference between healing and curing? What are some examples of both? How does healing happen? And what does it mean when the author states all healing is self-healing? How can nurses facilitate it? And what unique contributions can nursing provide in healing? What are the 2 ideas of the article that you picked out? So again, those are just some kind of questions posed to have you be thinking about as you go into your readings for this week. This is our health PowerPoint for the week. Again, definition of health can be the absence of illness, the process of becoming. It can also be described as balance. The World Health Organization defines health as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmary. Health, a state or condition of integrity, of functioning and perceived well-being. As a result, a person is able to function adequately, adapt adequately to the environment, and feel well. Here's where we get into different nursing theorists. Again, pay attention to this part. You'll want to be using this in your paper, but here are what some theorists have to say about health. Sister Callista Roy says the health-illness continuum is a continuous line representing states and degrees of health or illness that a person might experience at a given time. Health and illness are inventable parts of a person's life. Florence Nightingale, health is to be free of disease and to be able to use one's own powers to the fullest. Parsay says, it is whatever the person says it is. It's a process of human becoming. Johnson, health is the elusive state determined by psychological, social, physiological factors, which is held as a value by all health professions, a moving state of equilibrium, which occurs throughout the health change process. King says that health is a dynamic adjustment to stressors in the internal and external environment through optimum use of resources to achieve maximum potential for daily living. Jean Watson, health encompasses a high level of overall physical, mental, and social functioning. It is a subjective state, one which each person defines. Again, our Holistic Nurses Association defines health as optimal health is much more than the absence of sickness. It is a conscious pursuit of the highest qualities of the spiritual, mental, emotional, physical, environmental, and social aspects of the human experience. Dunn, I talked about Dunn's health and wellness grid, and again, here is more information on that. Good health or wellness is a state of well-being where the individual's self-esteem is maintained. To be able to interact effectively with family and community. Health is holistic in nature. It is the full expression of a person's physical, emotional, social, and spiritual potential. Health is a dynamic state in which the individual is continuously adapting to changes in both the internal and external environments in order to maintain a sense of well-being. Components of the internal environment are genetics, psychological, intellectual, and spiritual, and the external environments relate to the physical environment itself as well as social relationships and economic variables. Health is oriented towards maximizing the health potential of an individual. It is a continuum of balance and purposeful direction within the environment, which progresses to a higher level of functioning to arrive at its fullest potential, focuses on elements of awareness, education, and growth, and model can be applied to risk reduction and health promotion. It is a model that can be applied to families and communities as well as individuals' health. Again, what I'm asking you to do is to really think of an individual, but you could think of it by community or family as well. If you wanted to plot your own family on kind of a health continuum, you could. Optimal health is defined as the best health possible given an individual at a specific point in time. Optimal health can be achieved when interfering factors are eliminated or modified. There is also the health belief model. You're going to read about this in your book. The health belief model is assisting in planning health promotion activities, but is a much more physician kind of focused model. There is Penner's health promotion model. You're going to read about that in your book. I'd like you to think about the pros and cons of Nola Penner's promotion model. And then there's a chronic illness model. Again, talked about in your book. There are 7 assumptions that a course of chronic conditions varies or changes over time, that the course of a chronic condition can be shaped and managed, that technology is involved and can alleviate and or create side effects. Illness and technology pose both potential consequences for the individual as well as fulfillment and help in performing daily activities. That the performance of activities of daily living can affect your illness management, and that the course of illness is not inevitably downward, and that chronic illnesses do not necessarily end in death. All right, our last PowerPoint to get through, these are at least a little bit quicker this week, is on professional ethics. And let's see if I can get this to pop up here. So, professional ethics. There is no right way to do a wrong thing. General principles are focused on basic human rights. Again, here are some principles that I want you to kind of be thinking about when you're thinking about the concept of personhood. Beneficence, to do good, justice and fidelity or loyalty or fairness to all, self-determination and autonomy, that a person has a right to determine his or her fate. Full disclosure and veracity, so telling the truth. Informed consent, where they're freely making decisions after having all the information given to them. And then privacy and confidentiality. Here are some things that I want you to think about when you're making an ethical decision. So again, these are the ones that I want you to see kind of describing in your paper. Utilitarianism, deontology, those sort of things, if you can. So this idea of utilitarianism is focused on the outcome. You're making a decision based on two criteria. How much happiness is this decision going to make, and are we going to have the greatest good for the greatest number of people if we make this decision? The ends may be used to justify the means. So again, if we have a lifeboat, like who are we going to pick to get on the lifeboat? How are we going to make that decision? And then there's deontology, which says that there are rules and unchanging principles, that these must be followed and that you will always come to the same conclusion given similar circumstances. Again, we have our ANA Code of Ethics that we need to follow. I went through all of these last week with you. And our ethical decision-making model. What ethical dilemmas do nurses face on a regular basis? How do we decide what actions to take? Here are some of the step-by-step questions that will be laid out for you in the Goshen College decision-making model. But what do I know about the situation? What do I know about the patient or other stakeholders' values? You need to identify what are your own feelings on the topic, and do I need to set these aside to really be an advocate for what it is that my patient wants? What else do I need to know, and where is my primary allegiance? Where do we stand on big issues, and how do we form our own philosophies on these greater topics? So again, here's a TED Talk, what really matters at the end of life, that you can certainly look at to help kind of inform your decision making on this. Thank you for listening to this video for week 4, and I will see you next week.